right, good evening everybody. It's been kind of a crazy evening here in the Setzer household because the computer that does this crashed about 10 minutes ago, and I didn't even know if we were going to be able to get a live stream together. It's up. I don't know if it's going to continue to work, but we'll do our best, right? Because these are stressful times for everybody, and I know, listen, I've been through enough of these 25 years in Florida to know that everybody gets on edge. Everybody wants answers. Everybody wants to know what's going on. And, you know, we lived a period here as we're waiting on the 11 o'clock advisory of our models getting better and better and better. And now we're faced with a situation where our models really are still quite divergent. And our window for those models to not stay so divergent has run out. We need them to settle down and settle down quickly. I'm going to talk about what the models are showing. But first off, let's start off with our analysis. I kind of do this in steps: analysis, and then we talk about the models, and then we talk about the advisory. We go to the advisory the second it comes in. By the way, if you do like the videos, if you find them helpful, please share them with your friends and family. I try to give everybody information that they can use. Click the like button as well, click the subscribe button, and then also get the notifications so that, because I'm doing these now four times a day with every advisory. The next one will be tomorrow morning at around 5:30 a.m., provided my voice holds up. So let's show you what's going on first off this evening. And first off, now within the range of Key West radar, there is the center of Ian. You can see the donut-shaped reflectivity of the very tall cloud tops coming up, and it's almost a perfect circle there. There's several things we can start doing now. We can track very minute by minute the position of it, the center of it. We don't need Hurricane Hunter Recon to give us the location anymore. Of course, we still need them to give us the pressure, the wind field, things like that, especially because this is going to be moving close to land and possibly over land in several locations. The wind field size is going to be an important factor in the Hurricane Center as they're putting their advisory together. They're taking that all into account. How far out do the winds extend? We call those the wind radii. How far out do the hurricane conditions extend? There's several different wind radii that we look at. Where is the distance of what we call the radius of maximum wind? It looks like the center here is pretty tight. I don't think we have an eye on satellite quite yet, so it's still strengthening at this point, and we would refer this, excuse me, I promise I won't lose my voice, but you know what I am going to do? I'm going to have a little bit of hot tea here. All right, so let's talk about this center here. One of the other things we can do besides tracking it is we can measure the distance across, and we can kind of keep track of that. And at least from our radar point of view, which is really high up here, it's probably 30 to 35 miles across. The hurricane hunters were reporting earlier that the center was 10 miles across. That's pretty small. That's a pretty compact hurricane. One of the things that tells us is that small hurricanes with small eyes, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Hurricanes with small eyes have a tendency to rapidly intensify. Their intensity can go up quickly and it can come down quickly. So as long as this eye remains compact here, the intensity could continue to ramp up and take off. But likewise, if that eye stays relatively compact, it could also be disrupted more significantly by wind shear and things like that. So these are the things. Yes, throat coat. That's what I'm drinking. All right, let's zoom out here and talk about how far away it is from South Florida. And now that we're tracking it like this and so close, we're going to be able to see if it does take these wobbles. The radar is the best way to track wobbles. So there's the center there, and we're about what here? About 140 miles from Havana, from Key West about 150 miles or so, from far South Dade about 320, Miami about 365, and into Broward about 400 miles away from the center there. Now, as the wind field continues to expand here, we're going to start seeing the wind come up, and as the center gets closer as well, we're going to start seeing the wind come up. So it's already starting to come up a bit in the Keys. I've seen several reports now of tropical storm wind gusts above 40 miles an hour, and no reports so far of sustained tropical storm winds in the lower Keys where the warning's in effect. Remember, as of the 5 o'clock advisory, we have the warning in the lower Keys, the tropical storm watch in the middle Keys, nothing for the upper Keys right now, nothing for Miami-Dade, Broward, or Palm Beach except for the flood watch. And I think this is going to be a huge flooding event. That's going to be a serious and significant thing that I think we are going to a long time remember the flooding from Ian, and unfortunately I think that applies basically statewide. Now, I'm based out of South Florida here, so all my references are to South Florida, but we're going to be taking a look at the southwest coast, the west coast, central Florida as well, just about the whole state. But sometimes when I forget that a lot of people are watching and from different areas, and so when I say here, I'm referring to South Florida, unless I'm pointing on the map with the arrow, and that's where it is there. So we've got these storms now that are coming up. They're coming up through the lower Keys. They're coming up through South Florida. Some of this is producing some very, very high rainfall rates, and tropical cyclones, tropical storms, and hurricanes are very efficient rainfall producers. So already we're getting what we call antecedent rain, which means we're having rain before the real rain really even starts, and it's setting the stage for what I think is going to be, unfortunately, a pretty big flood event for large portions of Florida. In terms of a wind event, we'll talk more about that when the new advisory comes in, because of course the wind event, here in southeast Florida, and I think this is a good rule of thumb everywhere on hurricane shutters, is that we shutter for hurricane conditions. Sometimes strong tropical storm conditions and low in category 1 conditions, they're just about the same. It's hard to distinguish between 70 and 75 miles an hour. We typically don't shutter for that. That being said, people that have put up shutters and are putting up shutters, as long as you can do it safely now, because the winds are coming up. We've even seen some lightning. Let me turn on the lightning here, because we've seen some lightning with some of these storms as well. You can see it mostly off to the east there now, heading over towards Bimini. So we shutter once again for hurricane conditions. And so if you're in the hurricane warning area, which we will see in the new advisory coming out here in just a minute, you need to shutter. And you need, especially in central Florida now, which is under the hurricane warning, you're running out of time. If you're in the storm surge area and you're in an evacuation zone, you need to evacuate. It's that simple. The gray areas extend when you're not in the hurricane warning. And do you shutter? That's of course up to what you feel comfortable doing. I would never say don't shutter under any circumstance. And really the shuttering thing on these marginal areas, which I believe we still are in southeast Florida, marginal. We're not. This does not look like a shutter event once again for southeast Florida. I think that, you know, if you want to, go ahead. So the other thing, the other thing you have to remember here is that people have different values or different terminology for what is being hit by a storm. Some people might say that was the worst rain I've ever seen. We were really slammed by Ian. Others will say, well, the wind wasn't that bad and we really got off good with Ian. So I know there's a lot of different terminology. I try to be precise as I can with my words, because I don't want people to trip up kind of on my terminology. Sometimes I miss a little bit, and then I always try to go back around for a correction. All right, so let's move on here, because we're getting pretty close to advisory time. There is the lightning showing up right there. Pretty good storms coming into Marathon with that band. Up in central Florida and west Florida, just some showers right now, but these bands are coming up, so this is going to hamper the evacuation process tomorrow, tonight, later on tonight, and it's also going to hamper any last-minute preps that folks are doing. Here's the satellite loop through the evening, and you can see Ian getting better organized. Also, it looks like it's trying to form an eye there. Typically, when we say an eye, it's the satellite presentation of an eye, and that typically is associated with hurricanes, and in this case, it's going to be associated with a strong hurricane. One of the other things we do is we kind of now track the National Hurricane Center's forecast there and where the eye is, or the center is. And you can see there is their 6-hour forecast. So that end point there, that would be based on the 5 o'clock advisory, their 2 a.m. position, and the intensity forecast was 120 miles an hour. How are we doing here? Well, the center right now is just a little bit to the right of the eye. Is that a wobble? Is that a trend? I know that brings a lot of angst to a lot of people who are watching this very carefully, because some of the models shifted to the east tonight. And when that happened, a lot of folks said, wait, it's turning to the east. So technically the model has shifted more east, but it's still moving northeast. So I know that kind of, we got kind of a little bit tripped up in that as well. All right, let's move forward here, because I think the advisory is going to come in just about any minute now. I showed you that. Here are the ensemble tracks from the European. This was based on the 2 p.m. this afternoon data that went into it. And you can see a lot of the members there are kind of over here on the right side, and they are to the right of the National Hurricane Center's 5 p.m. track. The GFS, on the other hand, it was not right of the track, and actually here comes the advisory, so let's go ahead and get ready for that. Okay, so it is just now coming in. There are no changes to the watches or warnings with this advisory. No changes at all. And let's show you the 11 o'clock coordinates there. Now, this is the forecast advisory that's coming first. This is what builds the graphical models that we show here. Not the models, they're just the graphics that we use. And you're going to hear a little chime here in a second. That's the public advisory, and then we'll be able to read that together. That's what goes on the bottom of the screen. But while we've got it, we've got Category 2, winds of 105 miles an hour moving to the north-northwest at 13. Pressure, it's continuing to fall and falling quickly at 962 millibars. All right, so there is our first forecast track position. This is 2 a.m. tonight. The forecast, there it is. This is the 2 a.m. forecast there, and you can see it is crossing the western portion of Cuba, which is mostly flat, not expected to disrupt things much with the storm, and probably not disrupt the intensity at all. It'll probably just briefly pause and then continue to intensify. So that is 2 a.m. tonight, overnight tonight. Then as we go into tomorrow morning, and what you can see here, and this I like to always point out because we've always got new people joining our stream here, is that that's the hurricane cone there. Does it matter if you're in or out of the cone at this point? Absolutely not. The cone is only tracking a point. The cone is not tracking the storm size, and a storm is a big thing. If we were tracking points, the cone would be the perfect tool to track a point, but we're not. We're tracking a storm that has size. So you can see over here, there are the tropical storm conditions. This is the Tuesday evening, tomorrow evening position. This is the closest approach to the Keys. This is when the winds will likely be the strongest there, and you can see that extent of the tropical storm conditions here extends through the lower Keys, but once again not into the middle Keys where the tropical storm watch is in effect, and that hasn't been changed, and the watches have not been extended into southeast Florida. That red area there, that's the expectation of hurricane conditions, and most folks, studies have shown that most folks, when they experience tropical storm conditions, they say they were hit by the storm. So also one of the things is that we plan around the tropical storm winds when they arrive, and that's when we cease basically all outdoor activities and we just stay inside at that point from then on. We'll talk about the timing in just a second. So that is our 8 p.m. tomorrow evening position. There we are, 8 a.m. on Wednesday. The forecast is still for Category 4 there, and you can see the tropical storm winds coming inland here and the hurricane winds getting very, very close to the coast. And as we go forward here, that is 8 p.m. on Wednesday. So 8 a.m. Wednesday, 8 p.m. Wednesday. I may have misspoken there and said 8 p.m. 8 a.m. Wednesday, 8 p.m. Wednesday. Category 3, because once again, the thinking is that there's going to be increasing wind shear with the storm, and especially if it's a small, tight storm, it is going to start to decrease in intensity. Is it going to decrease the impacts? No. Being hit by a 3 as opposed to a 4 is not going to make anybody feel any better. So just because the intensity is going down doesn't mean anybody should say, oh, well, it's weakening to a Category 2. Look, most of us in Florida have never experienced Category 2 winds. Even in Irma, most of us in southeast Florida only experienced barely Category 1 winds. So this is going to be a big deal if it follows this track. This is, of course, the 11 o'clock advisory. So once again, that's our Wednesday evening position. There we are into Thursday morning. And look at the slowdown. This was reflected in the earlier advisory at 5. Basically, it is just reaching the coast there, the center, according to this forecast track, sometime Thursday morning. So what you can tell here is that while that is the Hurricane Center's forecast point, as we've seen in the models, there's still a lot of uncertainty. And I wouldn't be surprised if the track shifts a little bit more to the north or south. But this is virtually unchanged because, remember, we have to think that when there's a lot of uncertainty, it's not that point we're looking for. We have to think kind of in a bigger point, like the point itself is bigger. Maybe that point is 100 miles across. So that is Thursday morning. here, and you can see there are the hurricane conditions extending inland, well inland now, through much of western and moving into central Florida, right across the I-4 corridor there, as well now coming into far southwest Florida, Cape Coral, looks like just about touching Fort Myers, up through Sarasota County, Manatee County, on into Pinellas, Hillsborough, Polk County, and then on to the north, including Pasco and Hernando counties there. So that's where the hurricane conditions, according to this advisory, are spreading. And then as we go forward here, and for you folks watching in Georgia, I'm sorry, I'm not going to focus on you tonight. There's so much uncertainty in the first 3 days that days 4 and 5 could still have a lot of possibilities, a lot of uncertainty. So now look at this. Look what we're seeing here. This is the hurricane wind area, and I'm going to draw a line here. And I hate using lines when we're talking about uncertainty, but this is a possible extent of hurricane conditions into central Florida there. Even over, maybe there's some low-end chances here of hurricane conditions even across the northeast coast there, mainly south of Jacksonville. So this would be the Daytona Beach area. So obviously this is a big storm. It's going to have big impacts. It's going to have what we call all the hazards. Our hazards with hurricanes are first the wind, and if you're in the hurricane warning area, which I'll show you again in a second, you hide from the wind. You make your house a sturdy fortress to protect yourself from the wind. In terms of storm surge, that's our other hazard. You flee the water, you get away from the coast so that you're not in that storm surge zone. In terms of the other hazard, it's rainfall flooding. In fact, we've had fatalities in Irma. We had fatalities from the flooding itself. So that during the storm type of fatality there. Swollen creeks and rivers, they can be a huge problem. Stranded cars, areas where you don't see where the road ends and the canal begins, things like that. So that's the other hazard. And then, of course, we've got hazards of the possibility of tornadoes with this as well. That's a possibility. So we're dealing with everything here. This is the full meal deal, the whole, as I used to say, the whole enchilada. They don't say that anymore, do they? All right, so there is basically the whole representation of the cone, my cone, because this is something I developed here. And look what's going on in South Florida here. The tropical storm conditions almost to the Middle Keys there, and look at that, carved out, still missing, according to this advisory, far southeast Florida here, and thus the watches weren't pushed into Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beaches. Now, could they be at 5 a.m.? Absolutely. That's a distinct possibility. The Hurricane Center will be monitoring that short-term track, and just a little shift now. It doesn't take much to bring this area here right into South Florida. So what does that mean if we get into this area of tropical storm winds in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beaches? It means that our winds are going to be stronger, possibly, because it would be a tropical storm watch. It means that we could have some gusts up to 60 miles an hour. It means that we could have more frequent power outages, not widespread, but more power outages than just your spotty random power outage here or there. So that would be kind of a more of a shift here, a bend on the track. What about areas in the Keys, the lower Keys? Obviously, tropical storm warnings in effect there, hurricane warnings for the dry Tortugas. Thankfully, nobody's there tonight. And then we have the hurricane warnings up the coast. In fact, let's go to that graphic and talk about our patchwork here of watches and warnings. So I'm going to start from the south and work my way north. There is the tropical storm warning for the lower Keys, the tropical storm watch for the middle Keys, no watches or warnings for the upper Keys, for Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. But look at that, we are kind of pinned in here because right to the north, you can see the tropical storm watches go up the coast. And as we're getting some new updates here, you can see the tropical storm warning the tropical storm watch has been turned to a tropical storm warning now, inland areas just to the west of Miami-Dade and Broward. So the thinking would be that tropical storm eastern area kind of cuts like that, and then it stops here because of the timing. This is our watch latitude here. In other words, it's not quite within 36 hours. The warnings go up to 36 hours before the conditions arrive. The watches are for 48 hours. So hopefully all that makes sense. So let's move on again and going up the southwest coast here. So now everybody under a tropical storm warning up until you get to Inglewood there. So it's basically just to the north of Fort Myers, but Fort Myers under the hurricane watch there. Hurricane warnings then for Sarasota as well as all of Tampa Bay, and just to the north of that, hurricane watches in effect and on up the coast. So in the hurricane warning areas, hopefully you have your shutters up. In the tropical storm areas, hopefully you're prepared for power outages. Everybody has the threat for flooding. In the hurricane watch areas, it's kind of, in my sense would be, you kind of want to have the shutters up if they're not too hard to get up. All right, let's talk about the storm surge watches and warnings, because these were issued earlier. They also have not changed. The storm surge watch is in effect for the lower, middle, and upper Keys. 2 to 4 feet of storm surge over normally dry land is possible there. Then on up the coast, the storm surge warning, including the Tampa Bay area, where the surge values could be up to 10 feet if the storm comes in just right. Now, there's lots of possibilities here right along the coast where it could come in just south of Tampa Bay in terms of storm surge flooding. That would be better for Tampa Bay, not so good for areas to the south. It could come in just over Tampa Bay or north of Tampa Bay. Of course, that would not be good at all for Pinellas and Hillsborough. These are all possibilities, so that's why this warning area is kind of big. Also, the thing with storm surge, sometimes it will precede the storm a bit. That's probably not going to be the case this time. That happened in 2008 with Ike in Houston. The water started rising before the winds even picked up. It was still sunny, so that's probably not going to happen in this case. Let's talk a little bit about wobbles, because they're always an important consideration. Now, are we going to see a curve with the track here? I'm just going to kind of use the cone, which tracks the center point, just the point. Are we going to see kind of a curving action here? It's possible. In just a little slightly different curve, obviously has kind of some bigger implications north-south along the coast there. So that's certainly a consideration. We're going to watch for those curves, and now that it's in radar range, we're going to be able to see that pretty well. That's going to be very apparent. What advantage is that to us, that we can see a curve or maybe see a wobble? It means that we can tell folks in the path of the worst part of the storm, the core of the storm, where the strongest winds are, this is going to be really bad for you folks in this area. And you need to get into your interior room and take all of your precautions. Typically what they do in that situation, the National Weather Service will issue what they call an extreme wind warning. It's almost like a large tornado warning, because in some cases, especially in major hurricanes here, category 3 or 4, as we're talking here, that center wind area has tornado-like winds. It's just over a big area. So that would be the extreme wind warning. But there's also a thing that we look for, which are called wobbles. So let's say it kind of, and let me kind of draw a little bit here. So let's say it kind of makes this turn here, and then is going to the west, and then it looks like it's going straight. But then maybe it kind of wobbles here a little bit to the right, and then goes straight again, and then wobbles a little bit to the right and a little bit straight again. So effectively, it's kind of turning to the right, but those are more like wobbles, and those wobbles, as opposed to a gradual turn, are more like, oh wow, it just wobbled right 5 miles. Oh wow, it just wobbled right about 8 miles. And that will move where that center, where that worst part of the storm is going by little increments. But for those of you who are in the path of it, for those of us who are in the path of it, those little increments can be big increments as well. All right, so let's talk briefly about the timing here, and then hopefully I've been concise in my messaging this evening, and can answer any questions that you folks watching may have. I know there's lots of discussion, speculation. You know, is the euro, it took a right turn? Is it going to verify? You know, the Hurricane Center makes very, very gentle adjustments, and rightfully so. You know, it's not, otherwise we would be seeing the Hurricane Center's track just swinging back and forth, and that has not been the case. It's been gradual adjustments here, and the thinking over there, and they're the smart ones, the thinking over there is that it's not going to move enough, in this case, to post watches in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beaches in the Upper Keys as well. But a little more shift here at the 5 a.m. advisory, then those watches could go up. If it's a little bit bigger shift, then tropical storm warnings could come up, because we're kind of in that window now. But I don't want everybody to freak out if we get put under a tropical storm watch. It doesn't mean that the core of the hurricane is coming to southeast Florida. Unfortunately, I wish we could say the same for our friends on the West Coast. So let's do the timing thing here. So the closest approach now with the tropical storm conditions into the Keys is tomorrow morning. So hopefully everything is wrapped up in the Keys tonight. There's some little so we get these alert messages, marine weather messages, as well as local statements, hurricane local statements. So here we are afternoon on tomorrow. And remember, this is the expectation of where the tropical storm winds are. The bad weather is going to extend way, way out ahead of the storm. So don't say, okay, well, I've got until 2 p.m. tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. This tropical storm wind onset here, that's what we call it, the onset of tropical storm winds, signals when emergency managers plan to stop all outdoor activities, when everybody is going to just stop and wait for the storm out. So that means also for us that we need to be careful during the course of the hurricane and after the hurricane, because the resources are limited, and at times during the storm could be stressed as well. Okay, so let's move on. This is noon tomorrow. Wow, it's already that close that it's tomorrow. Amazing, huh? It seemed so far away just a few days ago, and now here it is. This is tomorrow evening, so there's sunset. So now we're going to see very strong winds here in South Florida. Tropical storm winds, gusts, yes, gusts over 40 miles an hour, definitely. Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beaches, gusts over 40 miles an hour. But remember, the definition for tropical storm is sustained. So the wind is blowing 42, 43, and then it's gusting up to 60 or 65. Right now, the expectation is that that type of condition, that type of wind is going to stay to the west of Southeast Florida, but not the case for Southwest Florida. So tropical storm winds now into Naples, approaching Fort Myers there. There we are, 8 p.m. And the worst, it's really going to be howling in the Keys, especially because it's an island chain. So what happens is the wind has no friction to really kind of slow it down over the water, the straits there approaching the Keys. So it's really going to be howling tomorrow night. As we go forward into time here we are at midnight tomorrow night, and there we are off the west coast, the southwest coast there, and you can see the tropical storm conditions arriving on up the coast now through Fort Myers into Sarasota, and by midnight tomorrow night approaching Tampa Bay, where conditions are going down. So going forward here now to 6 a.m., the tropical storm conditions are expected to be arriving in Tampa Bay, Hillsborough, likewise Pinellas, and now starting to push inland as well. So Polk County and Highlands County, as well as DeSoto, and then going on up there. Here are the tropical storm conditions now kind of getting over to Orlando. That's Wednesday afternoon, 3 p.m., and you can see to the north there as well up to Cedar Key. Also, one thing you can note here, and we call this the cessation of tropical storm conditions. The cessation of tropical storm conditions, or the ending of the tropical storm conditions now, is approaching the Keys there. So there we are by Wednesday evening. The weather is beginning to improve in the Keys, but then everything slows down, and you can see now there's the possibility of tropical storm conditions in Jacksonville. I think Tallahassee's in there as well on Thursday. So Thursday it is across North Florida and on the East Coast as well. Basically, and you can see why they see this is why I think a graphic like this makes sense. See down there where it says St. Lucie? I don't have my cursor right now, so I can't draw. That's where the tropical storm watch is, and that's where the tropical storm extent of their kind of covers that area. So if they put up watches for South Florida, we wouldn't be surprised there, but we're kind of right on the edge there. But it kind of makes sense when you look at a graphic like this, why the watches and warnings are laid out as they are. And then there we go on into to Friday, and then things finally begin to calm down here. So let me go back to one of our larger radars here, and then we'll take some questions, talk about what's going on. I know it's very stressful. Lots of folks. Look, in my opinion, maybe short of a large and fast-moving wildfire, it's a long, terrifying kind of thing, and it's stressful, and it's a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. You have to just kind of go through it. That's why, if you were watching, and you can check the videos that now are at craigsetzer.com. I finally got my videos there, craigsetzer.com. And by the way, I think this is my opportune time to throw in the old plug that be sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification button. Like people keep saying, be sure to say that. Be sure to say that. So there you go. All right, let's go back to talk about the stress of a tropical storm or a hurricane event. It's a long duration event, and there's 3 phases. There's the preparation phase. It's very, very stressful because there's so much unknown. There's the storm is hitting phase. And I'm not just talking about the rain here. I'm talking about when the hurricane winds and the tropical storm winds come in, and it's howling, and it is whistling out there, and it is very, very frightening. And sometimes you hear things breaking and stuff like that, and the power goes out. That's what I call the terrifying phase of the storm. And then there's the recovery phase. And sometimes that, unfortunately, can be the worst phase of all, because you've been impacted by the storm, and it is a very long and just painful process. So it's 3 phases. There's 2 phases of the preps I always talk about, which is the prepare your house, because you want it to survive the storm. So that's why we shutter, we keep the wind out. And this, I'm going to give this tip also here for folks who are going to be in the stronger part of the storm here. When the winds really come up, close your inside doors to your house, because what happens is that what destabilizes the house, and I talked to a hurricane structural engineer, what destabilizes the house is somehow the wind gets into the house and then gets into the whole house. So if a window does break and you have your doors closed, you're trying to isolate the wind from getting into the rest of the house. That's one of the things. The pressures that hurricane force winds create on a structure are enormous. They're amazing. So the other thing I want to remind everybody about is after a storm, generators, carbon monoxide detector. Think of the 2 together. If I've got a generator, I've got a carbon monoxide detector. If I'm running my generator, my carbon monoxide detector is in my house and it's on. And I am making sure that carbon monoxide doesn't get in. Most of the post-storm fatalities last year were from carbon monoxide poisoning. We don't want you to get through the hurricane only to not make it through the recovery. That's something we don't want to have happen. Also, statistics show that cardiac arrest is a big post-storm fatality cause. Cardiac arrest, heart attack. So after the storm, my number 1 advice is stay safe, take it easy, and it skews to men who are 60 and older, because I think what happens is, you've had some damage, you've got trees in your yard, your fence is down, things like that, and you get out there and you start doing things you haven't done in 10 years or 5 years or whatever. So you just have to really be careful after the storm. All right, so let's look into the chat here and see what's going on. So worried for Brickell, there could be, because of just the flooding. I mean, the rainfall flooding. There's 2 types of water we think of, which is also during the storm fatality producer. It's rainfall and storm surge. The Brickell area, I think we could have some rainfall flooding, which is very debilitating, especially if you're trying to move around and prepare. Pretty quiet in Homestead with some bands that passed through earlier. Thanks for that. Let's see. Steady rain in northwest Lauderhill. Okay, thanks for that report. Homestead, bring in the lawn stuff. Yep, bring in the lawn stuff. That's right. So there's still time before the winds really come up, especially in Central Florida, to take care of anything that can blow around. You don't want it ending up in your neighbor's yard, things like that. And for those of you who have a trash day, I think they usually suspend trash collection. Do that and help out your neighbors by, if you see leaves over the storm drains, try to clear that out so the water can go down as long as it can. Impacts for Western Polk, like North and Lakeland area and stuff. You guys, I think, are in the hurricane warning, number 1. And number 2, you are going to experience hurricane conditions based on this advisory. If you're not in the hurricane warning now, you probably will be. That's Polk County, Western Polk County. So you need to, if you have shutters, get them up. If you have anything to prepare for power outages, take care of that. It's basically the big hurricane preps there in Polk County. What's up with the east trend? Yeah, this is this model swing thing. And model swings when it's 5 days out. You're like, guys, the model's going to swing windshield wiper back and forth. And you kind of expect it. You don't expect the model swings when it's 2 days out or 3 days out in that 2 to 3 day time frame here. And I posted something earlier on the uncertainty areas there. But of course, we're going to be watching that very, very carefully, especially for the west coast of Florida. Let's see, substantial flooding taking place already. Of course, you know what? I already had some flooding in my neighborhood. So this is kind of a sign for folks in Central Florida who are watching, West Coast, East Coast, Central Florida. There is some heavy, heavy rain coming, and it is going to cause some flooding. So you have to think about that in your evacuation plans as well. In Kindle, Loya items are brought inside. Good stuff. Rather be safe than sorry. Always, always, always. Yes, I've got the throat coat. It seemed to help with that sip early on there. And it's funny because I've got mosquitoes biting me from earlier when I opened the doors to get the stuff moved out of my patio area too. So it's crazy. All right, this thing could go on the southeast track, make landfall as a major, cross the state as a hurricane. It's a possibility. Now the wind shear is really going to be coming up. So the farther north it crosses the state, likely the weaker it's going to be. Now weaker doesn't mean it's not going to be something, because it is going to be something. Typically when a hurricane weakens, the wind field spreads out. You don't have the core of extremely intense winds, but you just have a bigger area of bad winds. So that's something certainly to consider. Let's see, what else? So how quickly do storms decay for Orange County? Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the winds are going to decay, and there's a model, and unfortunately I don't have it up because I just really wanted to kind of wrap things up tonight with this advisory. There's a decay model. And you know what? Let me call it up, and because that's a good question. How fast is this thing going to decay here? And let me see if I can get it right away. Because earlier I was looking at, and if you look at, so here's the thing. If you look at some of the models that we posted, that are posted online, and let me see if I can put it up here so you guys can see it as well. I think this will show it. Nope, not quite. This one will show it. There we go. So all those lines going down, that's the intensity coming down because of the wind shear. But there's a model in there called DSHP. DSHP. That stands for decay ship. And so that is the statistical hurricane intensity. Why can't I think of the P right now? Anyway, this is what happens when you do 4 advisories a day live, right? Anyway, trust me, the statistical, prediction system. Okay. Statistical Hurricane Intensity Prediction System, SHIPS. And the D-SHIPS is the decay ships because it takes into account the impacts of friction from land. So to find how quickly the hurricane would weaken or de-intensify from land, look at the D-SHIPS. That's what tells that. And if I can find it in there without taking too much time, the D-SHIPS is... I can't find it in there, but you'll be able to just do look up the SHIPS model. Okay, the D-SHIPS brings it down to tropical storm strength by day 3 and 4, and so that's in the Wednesday, Thursday time frame. It looks like there. So but good question there. Let's see, what's the threshold for tropical storm watch in terms of likelihood for tropical storm winds? So it's a little bit subjective. Because tropical storm winds, the watch means the possibility, and the warning means the expectation or the likelihood. We are right on the edge, I would think, of watch here. And in fact, if you look at the Hurricane Center's website, they have and maybe I can put it up here. Let me show you guys this, if I can remember which button to show. I think this, now that's the right one. I've got a little keypad here that has all the buttons on it. So in the advisory, there is and let me see if I can find it here. Okay, there it is. It's called the wind speed probabilities, and it's in table form. Now you can see the Hurricane Center's kind of rainbow graphic of the wind speed probabilities, but you can find this on their website. It's a text product, and it basically shows up in the top here. Those are all the times there. And then there's the 12, 24, 36, 48, and 120-hour forecast there. And then it's got the possibility of tropical storm, 50-knot winds, which we typically think of as strong storm winds, which are hurricane gusts, okay, probably of hurricane gusts, and then 64-knot, which is hurricane winds. And you can see that there's values all the way up the East Coast there. They're showing up. North Carolina has a 10% chance. Morehead City, North Carolina, a 10% chance right now of the winds. So you can look at what are called the incremental values. Those are the ones in the middle. Usually what I do is I look at these end values there. That's the cumulative value in the parentheses. That's like the whole life of the storm. What's your chance of getting the tropical storm winds? So let's break it down here and talk about a few of these. Jacksonville, chance of tropical storm winds based on this advisory, 64%. That's a high value. That's why the watches are up there. Gainesville, 75%. Chance of hurricane in Gainesville, 18%. 40% chance for hurricane force gusts there in Gainesville. Daytona Beach, 72% chance for tropical storm conditions, 37% chance for hurricane gusts, and 21% for hurricane winds. That's a high value there. That's crossing the state. The Villages, I know we had a viewer earlier from the Villages talking about what's it going to be like there. 83% chance for tropical storm conditions, 52% chance for hurricane gusts. That's power outages, big power outages, and 26% chance for hurricane force winds. Orlando, 77% chance for tropical storm conditions there, 45% chance for hurricane gusts. That's power outages, and 23% chance for hurricane force winds. Cocoa Beach, Patrick Air Force Base, both at 77% there, coming on down the coast. West Palm Beach, 57%. That's a pretty high value. Don't be surprised if tomorrow morning at 5 a.m., if these values come up at all, the Hurricane Center puts up the watch, tropical storm watch for Palm Beach County. Fort Lauderdale, it's 51%. That's a close value there, so don't be surprised. Tropical storm watch there as well. The problem is that look at Miami-Dade, a 38% chance for tropical storm conditions based on this advisory. So what do? Do you put Broward in and not Miami-Dade? A lot of people in southeast Florida think of Broward, Miami-Dade kind of as the same communities, the same area, the same metropolitan area in many ways. So it's kind of a conundrum there because you're kind of splitting. You're saying like, well, it's going to be tropical storm possible here, but not down here. So it's kind of a tough call there. Chances for hurricane winds in West Palm Beach, 3%. Chances for hurricane winds in Fort Lauderdale, 2%. Chance for hurricane winds in Miami, less than 1%. So hopefully, I don't know if that makes anybody feel better or worse, but based on the advisory now, we're talking kind of some specific numbers here. I gave this advisory earlier that if your friend is asking if it's good to go to the beach and you say, well, there's a 20% chance for rain, then you might say to your friend, yeah, you can probably go. If there's a 40% chance for rain, you might still say go, or you might go yourself. If there's a 60% chance for rain at the beach, you still might go, you might not. Between 40 and 60%, most people say, I'm not going to bother going to the beach. But if you say, my friend is planning an outdoor wedding at the beach and there's a 40% chance for rain, then you make alternative plans. And that's what I say, if you're expecting a hurricane and your chances are 40%, that's very risky to take chances on a 40% probability of a hurricane. Most people at about a 20%, they start doing preparations for a hurricane, which is wise, because 1 out of 5 chances and you're wrong, it's a very bad day. All right, so let's go on down through the keys. Marathon, 57% chance. That's why the watch is in effect there. So it's interesting because West Palm Beach has equal probabilities as Marathon for tropical storm winds, but Marathon is in the tropical storm watch. I bet there was some discussion at the Hurricane Center on that. Here's our wind radii. What are we thinking here? And then Key West, 81% chance probability of tropical storm winds, 22% chance of hurricane gusts, and a 5% chance in Key West of hurricane winds. Okay, over onto the West Coast now, and I don't know if calling out all these numbers is helping anybody here. There may only be 3 viewers sticking around to watch at this point, but I know a lot of times people want to know what is my chance here. So I kind of feel like it's a little bit worth it, even if it's 3 viewers, right? 3 of us, the 4 of us will be fine. 90% chance in Naples, 47% for hurricane gusts in Naples. So we're thinking good chance for power outages there. Fort Myers, interestingly, based on this run, the chances are a little bit lower in Fort Myers at 83% for tropical storm, but they're just about as high for hurricane gusts, and they're higher for hurricane winds. So I think that's how the model that generates this showed the curve of the storm track there. 98% chance in Venice, 54% chance for hurricane winds in Venice, hurricane conditions. That's a shutter-up situation. Tampa, Florida, 96% chance for tropical storm, 74% chance for hurricane gusts, so widespread power outages, and about a 50% chance for a hurricane. 50-50 chance for a hurricane. I am doing all of my preparations. Cedar Key on up the coast there in Levy County, 84% chance for tropical storm winds, 54 for hurricane gusts, so power outages, and about a 30% chance for hurricanes. That's pretty high as well. And finally, Tallahassee. I know a lot of folks concerned for FSU, Tallahassee, with students there, family there. 43% chance for tropical storm winds, but only a 14% chance now for hurricane gusts. So it's a kind of a marginal power outage situation there. So real quickly, any more questions? Could it go as far south as Fort Myers? You know, if the models trend that way, it's possible. My favorite model, at this point, I'd like to say my favorite model is the one that is right. And so far, we're kind of having a hard time figuring out what that's going to be yet. So I think it's going to wrap it up because I'm going to be back here in, 6 hours, 5:30 a.m. So once again, let me just remind everybody, if you like the video here, be sure to click the like button, subscribe, click the notification button, and we will talk to you tomorrow morning.